for me, it really took off around Christmas time. There was in 2020 when the decision was made, or when the cases started rising up again, and basically they had to resort to a kind of another draconian lockdown in it's after Christmas and early 2020. I noticed these Facebook groups were getting stronger and stronger, and there was a British group kind of looking to kind of open up all the shops, no restrictions whatsoever. And very quickly there was Irish groups aping them on Facebook, which had thousands and thousands of members very quickly. So when I was watching them, and and at the same time the vaccines were arriving, and straight away, there was conspiracies about the harm the vaccines were causing, and they were being spread on these same groups. Conspiracies about Bill Gates and Bill Clinton, and the Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum. All these kind of were rolled in on one. So it kind of crystallized for me in early January this year, when I noticed, and we started doing some research on it, and we saw there was at least 20 Irish groups really on Facebook that had each had at least 1,000 members. Some had tens of thousands of members, and where all these kind of conspiracy stories from around the world were being pushed quite extensively. It's very interesting what we found. Like some of the conspiracy theory stuff was easily dismissed, and you had stuff and it had kind of Facebook would tag it, that there was issues with it, and a lot of it wasn't tagged at all, and it would take a lot of work. Like I drill into it. Like there was a story that still gets pushed around, that the WHO had advised that masks shouldn't be worn indoors anymore, and you had to drill into it. And the Facebook page was linked to like a website, and then that linked to a WHO paper that had been published, and there was one line they'd taken out of context that was propagating the whole story. And so you had to do a bit of reading of, that took me an hour to drill into exactly what was said, just to disprove that one thing. But it's been shared thousands of times on these anti-lockdown groups, or anti-vax groups, or just kind of COVID skeptic groups. Is kind of a tag we would have used to talk about them, where conspiracies were spread around. So some of them would take a lot of work to disprove. There was always a kernel of truth in them, a lot of them. And some of them, it was very hard to find where the kernel of truth was. Just that Bill Gates is a very wealthy man, and that he likes vaccines. The fact that he was buying up land, that this would spin into all sorts of mad conspiracy theories about Bill Gates looking to buy up food production, and this the whole pandemic being conspiracy theory propagated by him. There was a real mishmash of people. Again, you had some business people there. You had people, like there's a lot of hash being smoked. A lot of beer being drunk on the streets. That was very evident. You had the Irish Freedom Party handing out flyers. You had guys looking for a fight. Firing off rockets, fireworks directly at Gardaí. You had respected doctors. Retired doctors. There's a handful of GPs that are very anti-lockdown and anti-vax as well, and some of them made speeches outside St. Stephen's Green, decrying the measures that have been put in place. To at that stage, like shops weren't allowed to open. Most businesses were closed, except supermarkets, and a lot of frustration that that this they're really underplaying the dangers of COVID, and the dangers of mortality prospects from that. I suppose, having watched what happened with QAnon when I was at the protest outside O'Connell Street, people were dancing, drinking beer, smoking hash. I noticed these women wearing these black T-shirts over their hoodies. When I spoke to these women who were happy, one of them was happy to be quoted by name. Her friend wasn't. They'd matching shirts. There's another 3 or 4 supporters with them. They spoke about this crazy conspiracy theory, where St. James's, the new children's hospital, has been built there in near Dublin city centre, that is really a mass burial site for young babies that have been harvested for this kind of elixir of youth, the adrenochrome, to keep RTE stars looking young. And they're telling me to go and BitChute, this website, where a lot of stuff that doesn't get allowed on YouTube or gets taken down from YouTube is allowed on BitChute. A lot of right-wing stuff. They're saying, that's where you find it. This explains all this. I've never been able to find exactly that video that these women were talking about, but just the fact that they were on the streets among all these mishmash of other groups, talking about these crazy conspiracy theory, which if you followed the QAnon stuff, it echoed some of that. The Pizzagate, that there was where under QAnon's conspiracy, there's the Democrats and the Hollywood elite are taking this adrenochrome as well. So it's just been refixed, repurposed for an Irish audience, and here it's the RTE stars, or they're doing it in league with the politicians to keep looking young. But it was really frightening, I suppose. Like these women had children, and they're fully gone down the rabbit hole. Those two women in particular lived in Swords. To find that they've gone down the rabbit hole so far that they believe this absolute BS story. That's just incredible. Like imagine that's something you actually believed. That public people who work for RTE are actually in league with medics and burying these children at the hospital. Like if you drill into it, like it's just gobsmacking. So obviously, look, we quoted those women that as part of that our coverage, say like this is this mad stuff is on the streets. And what was really shocking for me, I suppose, is all this stuff's been passed along on Facebook groups, on Twitter as well to a certain extent, and very much so on Telegram. I joined a lot of these groups where they're saying, look, before it's taken down, join our Telegram group. And the Telegram, it's just unbelievable, like a lot of anti-Semitic stuff. This old fallacy that Jews are behind so much of what's going wrong. It's real dangerous racist stuff being passed around. I do think social media companies could take more responsibility. I think they should name and shame bloggers, that they're like, they use it. Like I've talked to people in Google about this, especially, and Facebook to a lesser extent. Like they do, they have kind of like not like a quite a 3 strikes and you're out job, but they do, if people are misbehaving, spreading misinformation or hate, they're punished. Their accounts are locked. But then, after that, they're allowed to open up again and off they go. But I think if the social media companies could be a bit more transparent on these guys, saying, look, this guy, he's been reprimanded 6 times or whatever for spreading misinformation, here's a track record of him. So then, if you're clicking on this guy for the first time, like you would, like when people are past these videos, they don't have time to do the research. But if there was warnings accompanying their videos, like I understand, like the American companies especially, they come from a place where freedom of speech is sacrosanct. But these guys are getting wrapped over the knuckles repeatedly, allowed to stay up and use these huge networks to basically harvest more likes, more people who potentially will fundraise, or sorry, contribute to their fundraising. And the innocents, I suppose, that are about to go down the rabbit hole have no way of knowing, oh, this guy is a repeat offender for spreading misinformation. So that's just something I think just very basic that could be brought in by the social media companies. It doesn't require regulation. It just requires transparency, and would help, like for me as a journalist to say, well, look, this guy, Twitter have reported that he's had his account locked X amount of times, or YouTube or whatever. And I think it would really undermine their credibility if we're able to see how much action has actually been taken against them by the social media companies. But like I think there is a fine balance. I'm a pro freedom of speech person as a journalist. So but when people repeatedly break the rules, I think they have to be taken off these social media sites as well. Like there is a digital safety commission probably coming down the track now. I think that's probably needed, but it needs to be very tightly constrained as well, because just because people disagree with Tony Holohan, I don't think they should be knocked off social media. So there needs to be very um, tight rules on when stuff is taken down, when it's clearly dangerous, when it's clearly not that it's offensive, but that when it's clearly inciting hate, or it's clearly pushing misinformation, then that would be a certain threshold. So, look, it's a very interesting area of journalists be covering, because it's the social media companies and governments are only kind of cottoning on to the huge power that these social media accounts have in times of crisis like we are in at the moment. People can latch on to stuff that's just completely untrue, and you know especially with, I think a lot of people aren't reading newspapers, unfortunately. They're open to people who are pushing these videos, which I can see the production values of some of these, even the Irish sites, are increasing. So I think increased regulation is necessary, because they're just facilitating hate and misinformation at the moment. So, but look, I like, if they're taking undue action, I'd be the first to report that people are being punished for just voicing an opinion. So it is a tightrope, and that. So I'm not saying there's no silver bullet, but I think some increased social media regulation is definitely necessary.